Dear Cover 3 Pod, last year Tom Fornelli referred to me as a poor bastard for being both a Tottenham and a Tennessee Vols fan. Well, as Michael Scott would say, oh, how the turned tables have turned. Tottenham is flying high with Antonio Conte, and Tennessee may have found our savior in Josh Heupel. My question is, what is Heupel's long-term ceiling at Tennessee? Are we destined to be a typical air raid team where the ceiling is 10 wins and a New Year's Six bowl? Or can Heupel lead the Vols to an SEC and potentially national championship?
You poor deluded bastard.
Now it's not even poor bastard, it's poor deluded.
Listen, Antonio Conte is my favorite manager in the world, so Tottenham's going to be fine. You're going to enjoy that. It's going to be really good. Buckle up. You're going to have fun. Jordan with the PSA. Fouls are back. I think, honestly, it's hard to say because with the NIL, like obviously Tennessee's gotten off to a pretty decent start in the recruiting class this year. If they're able to maintain that, then I think that they're going to improve. But I think that honestly, and Bud has mentioned this, like Josh Heupel was hired kind of as a bridge in a way, and it's like he's going to be entertaining. You might not have the best team kind of competing for the East, but coming off of where Tennessee has been and just getting some sort of stability, at least it will placate fans in that it's going to be fun. And let's look at how it's played out. Tennessee went 7-6 last year, but scored a bunch of points, and fans now think that they're going to be competing for the SEC and playoff berths because they went 7-6 and outscored their opponents by, I think, 1 point on the year. So I think that under Josh Heupel, you're probably an 8-4, 9-3 kind of ceiling. I don't think you're going to be better than Georgia anytime soon. And I think if Florida gets its act together, I mean, 9-3 is where I think you're probably going to be, best case scenario.
I would say higher, more bullish on what they could be. I mean, we get this question a lot from fans of programs that have never really had runs like Tennessee did 20 years ago. And I know it's 20 years ago, but I think there's the desires there such a way. I mean, it's almost a problem because the fan base gets in their own way hiring and firing coaches, but financially got one of the stronger collectives. We've seen that pay off. They want to do what it takes to compete against the likes of Florida and Georgia in the East. I do feel like the offense is good enough where if their defense can start coming along and eventually get better, they get somebody special at quarterback, I think you'll start seeing them show up in that blue chip ratio that Bud always talks about where the talent will be there. I don't think they'll be a dynasty. I don't think they're going to knock off Georgia anytime soon, but I think if things fall their way, I think they'd be 11-1, 10-2, and competing for an SEC championship. I think they could knock off Georgia at home in that environment. If Georgia doesn't evolve offensively, it's a massive opportunity for Tennessee. But
so go ahead.
I think Georgia can evolve offensively.
So my example that I go to is a story from the recent college football history when the collectives, before there were collectives, when we've seen a program be able to take all of the want to and suddenly see things jump. And I'm looking at the Hugh Freeze era at Ole Miss. And what was the ceiling of that Ole Miss team? It was playing in what are now, New Year's Six bowl games. It was even beating Alabama head to head. But you know what it wasn't doing? Winning an SEC championship, because as much want to as there is, as much offensive firepower as they were able to create, they just didn't have the consistency to not only win that one big game, but also to be able to get a stop on like 4th and whatever when Arkansas was able to steal away the opportunity to win the SEC West. We're talking about just the Josh Heupel era at Tennessee. That's what I see as the ceiling. That's what I see as, where you can realistically believe things can get to, and maybe even quickly, maybe even with Nico, maybe even in one of these next 3 seasons, that with an infusion of talent, you can get to the point where you're going to win that game against Georgia. But the problem is the loss against Alabama, if it comes, is going to count for your SEC schedule the same way as everything else. So you're going to be sitting there sweating tiebreakers just like Ole Miss was, back in the day. And so I think that it is possible that we are seeing Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl when it's not part of the college football playoff as a 10-2 team, or that Tennessee starts the month of November needing a little help, but being in the SEC championship race. I definitely think that the history of tradition, and what an infusion of real talent can really bring to the Vols allows that to be the ceiling. But Georgia and Alabama have just had this thing sustained. Kirby Smart, as we mentioned, had to bump his head against the ceiling. He had to continue to stack class after class after class after class. And that consistency that he's had over the last 5 years is what set Georgia up to be able to be a national championship contender almost every single season. So I don't know if Josh Heupel's there for 10 years, but I think Josh Heupel could be there for the next 4 or 5. And in that 4 or 5 window, I could see Josh Heupel leading Tennessee to a double-digit win season and a New Year's Six bowl game.
A couple other factors we need to consider, though, too. One brought up by Cameron Lopez in the chat, so thank you for that. But first, we have to consider what the future of the SEC is going to be. Because let's remember, right now, Tennessee is competing in the East, and its primary competition is Georgia. Well, Oklahoma and Texas are joining the conference soon. So there's 2 more programs that are going to be considering themselves teams prepared to be competing for SEC titles. What will the alignment of the conference be once that happens? Do Auburn and Alabama move to the East as Oklahoma and Texas are added to the West? Do they just get rid of divisions altogether? Does Tennessee have to keep its protected rivalries? Because like we've mentioned, Georgia, what Kirby's done there, been able to stack recruiting class on recruiting class. But what Georgia doesn't have to do every year is play Alabama in the regular season. Tennessee does. It's one of their protected rivalries. So you've got that to consider. You have realignment to consider with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. There's just, I don't know, once those new schools come in, you add that to the pool that already has A&M, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Like, where's Tennessee going to fall realistically in that pecking order? I don't think this is, like, I'm not saying they can't have a 10-win season or an 11-win season, a special year, everything goes wonderful. But I think that if you're looking for consistent finishes, the best you're looking at for consistently is going to be 9-3. That's just what I think it's realistic.
So I'll go back and kind of readjust my answer, because I do think 9-3, but I think the changes of college football are going to benefit a program like Tennessee, because if we see playoff expansion, not just 1 or 2 teams from the SEC, possibly 3 and even 4, I think that's a huge benefit for Tennessee. And I think that would be where all of a sudden maybe they can come in and make some waves and win an SEC title, or lose the SEC, not get the SEC title, but get to the playoff. So I would say the record, I would probably agree with you closer on that one.
Oh my gosh, Jake in Knoxville, you're going to be so happy, because what we're telling you is that the ceiling is a Tottenham ceiling. You can finish top 4, make Champions League, get into the playoff. That's about the ceiling, but you ain't getting ahead of Man City and Liverpool. You're just rooting to finish in the 3rd or 4th spot.
Well, now, if Antonio Conte was managing Tennessee, I would say maybe they could win the division in the SEC. Because nothing against Josh Heupel, but as far as where my power rankings are from different sports of managers, Antonio Conte here, Josh Heupel here.